In the far edge of the galaxy, where the dead star Black Ember floated in darkness, there was a giant space station called Unity Prime. It was home to the leaders of the Galactic Council, the ruling body of the galaxy. Thousands of ships came and went every day. Every species in the galaxy had a seat here, except for one: humans. 400 years ago, Earth joined the Council. Humanity had risen fast. Their machines, their weapons, their ideas, they had changed the balance of power. Many feared them, but all respected them. And then, one day, they vanished. Their signals stopped. Their colonies went quiet. Their ships never came back. No one knew why. Now, years later, people still whispered about it. Some believed they were destroyed. Some believed they were hiding. Others believed something worse. But no one had answers. Not until today. James Carter stood at the wide window of his transport ship, staring at Unity Prime as it came into view. The station was massive, shaped like a metal ring spinning around a glowing core. It looked peaceful from a distance, but James knew better. This was a place of politics, fear, and control. James was 36 years old. His short black hair was neatly cut. His sharp brown eyes missed nothing. He wore a plain black jacket, no marks, no symbols. He liked to keep a low profile. He was an investigator. He followed facts. He did not care about power. He only cared about the truth. The ship docked, and James stepped onto the station. The halls were clean and bright, but the air felt heavy, like the station was holding its breath. People walked past him, aliens of all shapes and sizes, speaking in hushed voices. James didn't stop. He headed straight to the council tower, where Chancellor Virex saw you and waited. Virex was the leader of the council. He had ruled for over 30 years. He was tall and thin, with pale skin that shimmered slightly under the lights. His sharp blue eyes watched everything. Many feared him. Some admired him. James did neither. He trusted no one here. The guards let James in without a word. Virex stood by his desk, looking out at the stars. He turned slowly when James entered. "James Carter," Virex said in a cold, smooth voice. "Thank you for coming." James nodded. "You asked for me. I'm here." Virex smiled, but did not reach his eyes. "You know the reports. Earth has gone silent. No signals. No movement. Nothing for years. The council grows uneasy." James waited. He knew Virex was not finished. "We need answers," Virex continued. "Find out what happened to them. But listen carefully, James. This must not spread. The council cannot afford panic." James raised an eyebrow. "And if I find something you don't like?" Virex's smile faded. "You are here to report the facts, nothing more." James nodded again. But inside, he knew there was more to this. He had seen this game before. Leaders who feared the truth. Leaders who wanted control more than answers. "I'll start right away," James said, turning to leave. Virex called after him, his voice sharp. "Remember, Carter, do not stir fear." James didn't answer. He walked out of the chamber, feeling the weight of the mission settle on his shoulders. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones. As he walked through the halls of Unity Prime, James knew one thing for sure. If humanity was truly gone, the council would already know why. But if they didn't, then someone was hiding something. And he was going to find out what. James Carter left the council tower without looking back. His mind was racing, but his face showed nothing. He had learned long ago that on Unity Prime, showing your thoughts could cost you everything. He made his way to the hangar, where his small ship, the Watcher, was waiting. It wasn't fast and it wasn't armed, but it was reliable. James had flown it for years. He trusted it more than he trusted anyone on the council. As he boarded the ship, he checked the old records. There were 3 human colonies in nearby star systems. All had gone silent. No one had visited them in years. No one dared. James set a course for the first one, Vera 09, a research colony on a frozen moon. The trip took 2 days. During that time, James reviewed everything the council had on humanity's silence. The reports were short and cold. No real details. No real effort to explain what had happened. Just notes saying no contact and investigation closed. He knew this wasn't just failure. This was a cover-up. He could feel it. When the Watcher reached Vera 09, James stared at the frozen world below. The colony sat on the edge of a deep canyon. Lights were still on, but no movement showed on the sensors. The buildings looked untouched. No signs of damage. No signs of life. James landed near the main tower and stepped outside. The air was cold and thin. He moved carefully, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. His scanner showed nothing. No heat. No energy readings. It was as if the colony had simply stopped. He entered the main tower. The lights flickered weakly. Frozen dust covered the floors. He walked through empty halls. Desks were left in place. Tools were dropped on the floor. It looked like the people had just vanished. He checked the control room. The systems were offline. The data core had been wiped clean. It was too perfect, too clean. Someone had done this on purpose. James moved deeper into the tower. He searched every room, every hallway. Hours passed, but he found nothing. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just silence. Frustration grew in his chest. He knew someone had been here before him. Someone had covered the tracks well. But as he turned to leave, something caught his eye. A panel on the wall was slightly open. He pulled it aside and found a small device, no bigger than his hand. It was old, hidden deep inside the wall. He carefully removed it and connected it to his scanner. At first, it showed nothing. Then, after a moment, a message appeared on the screen. The words were simple, but they sent a chill down his spine. "We are watching." James stared at the words for a long time. Who had sent this message? And who was it meant for? He checked the device again. No sender, no date, no location. He took a slow breath and looked around the empty room. He knew one thing. This colony had not died by accident. Someone had made sure of that. And someone had left this message, like a warning or a promise. He left the tower and returned to the Watcher. As he sat in the pilot's seat, he looked out at the frozen land once more. 2 more colonies to check. 2 more chances to find answers. James set a new course and powered up the ship. The engines roared to life, breaking the silence for the first time in years. He didn't know what he would find next, but he knew he couldn't stop now. He was getting close. James Carter leaned back in his seat as the Watcher slipped through deep space. The message replayed in his mind again and again. "We are watching." He had never liked guessing. He liked facts. But right now, all he had were questions. What did the message mean? Who had left it? Were they watching him now? He pushed the thoughts aside. His next stop was Haven Reach, once a thriving human trade colony floating near a gas giant. If Vera 09 had been silent, he expected Haven Reach to be the same. But he had to be sure. The trip took several hours. As he neared the colony, his sensors picked up the same pattern. No signals, no movement. But unlike Vera 09, this place showed signs of damage. A section of the docking ring had been torn apart, leaving sharp metal edges hanging in space. The outer lights flickered weakly. James docked carefully, stepping out into the ruined station. The air smelled of burned wires and cold metal. Walls were scorched, and debris floated in zero gravity. It looked like there had been a fight. James moved slowly, checking every corridor. Some walls had laser burns. Some doors were welded shut. He could tell this had been cleaned up later. Whoever had fought here, their bodies were gone. Their traces were hidden. He made his way to the command center. It was sealed. James used his cutter to break through the lock. The door hissed open, and inside he found another empty room. Consoles were smashed. Screens were dark. James sighed. Another dead end. But as he turned to leave, a small sound echoed in the dark. A soft beep. Faint but clear. James froze. He pulled out his scanner and followed the sound. It led him to a half-broken console in the corner. He reached under it and found a tiny data chip, still active. Someone had missed it. He plugged it into his handheld device. A low voice began to speak. It was weak, broken by static, but the message was clear. They came from within the council. They ordered the shutdown. We tried to warn them. We tried to stop it. They're still watching us. Tell James Carter he needs to. The message ended there. Cut off. James stood frozen, the words hitting him like a hammer. Someone had recorded this for him. Someone knew he would come. Someone knew the truth about the council. He replayed the message again, listening to every word. The shutdown had been ordered by the council itself. That meant Virex had lied. The council had not just lost contact with humanity. They had made it happen. They had silenced Earth on purpose. James felt anger rising in his chest. He had been sent here to find the truth. But Virex already knew it. He had sent James not to uncover facts, but to control the story, to clean up the mess. James knew he couldn't trust anyone on Unity Prime now. He needed help. Someone who could dig deeper, someone who knew the Council's secrets. There was only one person he could trust, Lyra Hale, a tech expert who once worked in the Council's security network. She had gone underground years ago after exposing corruption. James had helped her escape back then. He hoped she would help him again. He quickly set course back to Unity Prime. As the Watcher sped through the stars, James knew he was walking into dangerous territory. If the Council had silenced humanity, they would do the same to him if he got too close. But it was too late to stop now. The truth was bigger than he had imagined. And somewhere, in the dark, someone was still watching. James gripped the controls tightly as the station came into view once again. He had a message to deliver. But first, he needed Lyra. James Carter kept to the shadows when he landed back on Unity Prime. The station looked as calm as ever on the outside, but James knew better now. This place was built on lies. The Council had silenced humanity. They had done it on purpose. And now, they were trying to cover it all up. He moved through the lower levels of the station, where security was weak and the lights were dim. This part of the station was old and forgotten, perfect for people who wanted to disappear. James knew where to find Lyra Hale. Years ago, she had told him about a hidden workshop deep in the maintenance tunnels. She had used it when she was on the run. If she was still alive, she would be there. James reached the entrance, an old service door hidden behind stacked cargo crates. He knocked twice, then paused, then knocked again. It was an old signal they used to use. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door slid open a few inches. A woman stood there, holding a small energy pistol. Her hair was short and gray now, but her sharp eyes had not changed. "James Carter," she whispered. "You're either very brave or very stupid." James raised his hand slowly. "I need your help, Lyra. It's bad, real bad." She looked him over for a moment, then pulled him inside and locked the door. The workshop was small, but filled with old tech. Screens, wires, tools, everything a hacker like Lyra would need. She waved him to sit. "Talk," she said. James told her everything. The empty colonies, the hidden messages, the recording from Haven Reach, and most of all, what the voice had said, that the Council had ordered the shutdown. Lyra listened without saying a word. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair and rubbed her face. "I knew they were hiding something," she said softly. "But this is bigger than I thought." James leaned forward. "Can you break into their private network? I need proof. Real proof." Lyra smiled faintly. "You never ask for small favors, do you?" James didn't smile. "Can you do it or not?" She stood and began pulling equipment from the shelves. "It won't be easy. They've locked down everything since I left. But I know a way." James watched her work. "We need to move fast. Virex already knows I'm getting too close. He'll try to shut me down next." Lyra nodded. "Then we better not waste time." They worked for hours. Lyra used old codes and hidden pathways in the Council system. She typed fast, her fingers flying over the keys. James kept watch at the door. Finally, a screen lit up. Lyra leaned in, her face tense. "I'm in," she whispered. James moved closer. Files began to appear on the screen. Secret meetings, orders signed by Virex himself, plans to deploy a powerful AI virus to disable all human systems across the galaxy. The virus was called Project Silence. James felt his chest tighten. It was all true. The Council had attacked humanity in secret. But there was more. Lyra opened the final file. It showed the virus report. It had one last note. Status: no full success report received. Unknown outcome. James stared at the words. The virus had never fully confirmed it had worked. That meant humanity might not be gone. They might have survived. They might be watching, just like the messages had warned. "We need to get this out," James said. "Everyone needs to know." Lyra nodded, but her face turned pale. "James, someone's here." James spun around. A red light flashed near the door. Council agents had found them. They had no time to waste. Lyra grabbed the data chip with the files. "I know a way out," she whispered. Follow me. They slipped through a hidden tunnel in the back of the workshop. Alarms began to sound in the distance. James could hear boots hitting the ground. They were coming fast. He followed Lyra through dark, twisting passages. They moved quickly, their footsteps silent. James knew they couldn't fight their way out. They had to hide, regroup, and plan their next move. They reached a small exit hatch and slipped out into the crowded lower markets of Unity Prime. They blended into the crowd, moving fast but careful. James looked at Lyra. She held the chip tightly. "We have the proof," he whispered. Lyra nodded. "Now, we bring it to the galaxy." The lower markets of Unity Prime were noisy and crowded. Bright signs flashed in different languages. Merchants shouted over each other, trying to sell parts, food, and tools. It was the perfect place to disappear. James Carter and Lyra Hale moved quickly through the crowd. Lyra kept the data chip hidden in her hand. They didn't speak. Both of them knew the Council's agents would not stop hunting them now. James scanned the crowd as they walked. He spotted 2 Council soldiers near a food stall. They wore plain clothes, but their earpieces gave them away. He grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her down a side path. "We need to get off this station," he whispered. Lyra nodded. "There's an old data vault on the East Wing. It's sealed and off the network. We can check the files again and find out if there's anything more." James frowned. "We have the proof. Why not just send it out now?" Lyra shook her head. "We need to be sure. We might have missed something." James didn't like it, but he trusted her. If Lyra said they needed to check again, she was probably right. They took the long way around, avoiding open halls and security cameras. Finally, they reached the East Wing. The area was dark and empty. The Council had closed this section years ago. Lyra used an old code to unlock a small door. Inside was a cold, empty room with a single console in the middle. Dust covered everything. James sealed the door behind them. Lyra sat at the console and powered it up. The screen flickered weakly, but worked. She plugged in the chip and started scanning the files again. James stood by the door, listening for any sounds outside. Minutes passed in silence. Then Lyra spoke. "There's something else, another file." James turned toward her. "What does it say?" Lyra's eyes scanned the screen. "It's a live system report from the virus itself." James moved closer, reading the words on the screen. The virus had sent reports to the Council's hidden network. It had shut down hundreds of human colonies, ships, and AIs. But the final line caught James's eye. "Final status, incomplete. Human systems adapted. Full shutdown failed. Unknown human response." James felt a chill in his chest. The virus hadn't worked as planned. Humanity had survived. Not only that, they had adapted. They had changed their systems to fight back. James leaned over the console. "Can you trace the last signal?" Lyra worked fast. She pulled up the last signal's path. It ended in one place, Earth. James stared at the screen. Earth was still out there, silent, but not defeated. Watching, just like the message had said. He looked at Lyra. "We have to tell the galaxy. Now." Lyra nodded. She reached for the broadcast control, but the console flashed red. They had been locked out. The door behind them suddenly shook. Someone was trying to break in. Lyra's face turned pale. "They found us." James knew they had only seconds. He grabbed the data chip and pulled Lyra toward the back wall. He knew this room had an old maintenance hatch, just like her workshop. He found it and forced it open. They slipped inside as the door behind them blasted open. Soldiers rushed in, but James and Lyra were already crawling through the tunnel. They moved fast, turning corner after corner. The tunnel shook with distant footsteps. They were being chased. Finally, they reached a small exit hatch leading to a storage bay. James pulled Lyra through and sealed the hatch behind them. They hid behind a stack of cargo crates, breathing hard. James looked at the chip in his hand. They had proof that the Council had attacked humanity. Proof that humanity had survived. Lyra touched his arm. "We need to reach the main broadcast tower. It's the only place they can't block the signal." James nodded. "Then that's where we go next." He knew it wouldn't be easy. The Council would have every guard looking for them now. But James didn't care. He had come too far to stop. They stood up, ready to make their final move. James Carter and Lyra Hale stayed low as they crossed the dark storage bay. James kept his hand on the data chip in his jacket. His heart pounded. This was their last chance. The broadcast tower stood in the heart of Unity Prime. It was the tallest structure on the station, built like a sharp needle pointing toward the stars. From there, all council orders, news, and official messages were sent to every corner of the galaxy. It was heavily guarded, but Lyra knew a way in. They used the old maintenance tunnels again, crawling through tight spaces beneath the station's surface. It took hours, but they reached the base of the tower without being seen. They stopped behind a large control panel. Above them, guards walked back and forth. James looked up at the tower. "How do we get past them?" he whispered. Lyra checked her small scanner. "There's a supply lift on the far side. If we can reach it, it'll take us to the top level, right next to the main broadcast control." James nodded. "Let's move." They waited until the guards walked away, then slipped out of hiding. They moved fast and quiet. James kept his eyes on the lift. When they reached it, Lyra hacked the control panel. The door slid open with a soft beep. They stepped inside. The lift began to rise. James checked his pistol. It was small, but it was all he had. He didn't plan to fight unless he had no choice. The lift stopped at the top. The doors opened, and they stepped into the control room. Virex Soluent was already there. James froze. Virex stood in front of the main console, surrounded by 4 armed guards. His cold blue eyes locked on James. "I knew you couldn't let it go. Carter," Virex said softly. James clenched his fists. "It's over, Virex. I have the proof." Virex smiled without warmth. "You think you've won? You think the galaxy wants the truth? They want peace. They want to feel safe. Humanity was a threat. We did what had to be done." James stepped forward, holding the chip tightly. "You silenced them. You lied to everyone." Virex's smile faded. "Put the chip down, James. Walk away, and you'll live." James felt Lyra's hand on his back. She whispered, "We can send the broadcast from the console behind him." James nodded slightly. He took one slow step to the side, keeping Virex's attention. "You're afraid of them, aren't you?" James said. "You're afraid they're still out there." Virex's face hardened. "They're out there, and if they return, there will be war." James took another step. Or maybe they've already returned. Maybe they're watching right now. Virex's eyes narrowed. That was the moment Lyra needed. She slipped to the side and reached the console. Her fingers flew over the controls. The guards noticed and raised their weapons. James moved fast. He pulled his pistol and fired at the floor, forcing the guards to duck. He grabbed a metal pipe and threw it at the lights above, shattering them. The room went dark for a second. Lyra hit the final command. The broadcast began. The lights flickered back on. Virex turned toward the console, his face twisted with rage. "No!" he shouted, rushing toward her. James tackled him to the ground. The 2 men struggled. Virex was stronger than he looked, but James had nothing left to lose. He grabbed Virex by the collar and slammed him against the floor. "You lose," James growled. Virex's face twisted in anger. "You fool. You've doomed us all." But James wasn't listening. He turned to the giant screen on the wall. The broadcast had started. Across the galaxy, every species, every colony, every ship was now seeing the hidden files. They were hearing the Council's secret orders. They were learning the truth about Project Silence. They were seeing the proof that humanity had been betrayed. James stood slowly, breathing hard. The control room was silent now. Even the guards stood frozen, staring at the broadcast. James looked down at Virex, who lay on the floor in defeat. The Chancellor had no more words. His face was pale. His rule was crumbling. James turned to Lyra. She nodded, her eyes wide with shock and relief. "It's done," she whispered. But James knew it was only the beginning. The truth was out, but the galaxy would not stay calm for long. The Council had been exposed. Humanity was still silent. And somewhere, in the dark, they were still watching. James and Lyra left the tower together, walking past the stunned guards. James didn't know what came next, but he knew one thing. The galaxy had changed forever. Chaos spread through Unity Prime like fire. News of the Council's betrayal had reached every corner of the galaxy. The broadcast played on every public screen. The hidden files were already copied, shared, and spreading across thousands of systems. The Council's secrets could no longer be buried. Every species, leaders, soldiers, traders, citizens, now knew the truth. James Carter and Lyra Hale moved through the lower levels of the station once more. This time, they didn't need to hide. Everyone was too busy watching the fallout. They stopped in an old observation deck at the edge of the station. The glass wall gave them a clear view of the stars. Beyond the station, deep in the distance, Earth hung like a dark blue, silent as ever. James leaned against the glass. His body was tired, but his mind was racing. He had done what he came here to do. The Council's lies were no longer hidden. But now came the harder part. What would the galaxy do next? He knew many would panic. Others would demand justice. Some would call for war. Lyra stood next to him, looking out at Earth. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. James shook his head. "I don't know." He knew that wasn't enough, but it was the truth. He had no idea what the Council would do now. Would they fall apart? Would they fight back? Would someone else rise to take Vyrex's place? And what about humanity? Were they really out there, watching, waiting? Were they planning to return? Or had they given up on the rest of the galaxy? James reached into his jacket and pulled out the small data chip. It had done its job. He didn't need it anymore. He sighed and placed it on the ledge in front of the window. It didn't belong to him now. It belonged to history. He turned to Lyra. "We need to leave the station. We've done all we can here." Lyra nodded, but before they could move, a soft beep sounded from the console nearby. James and Lyra froze. Slowly, James walked over and tapped the screen. A message appeared. Simple, clear, unmistakable. "We hear you." James stared at the words. His breath caught in his throat. Lyra moved beside him, her eyes wide. "Is that?" James nodded slowly. There was no mistake. The signal came from Earth. No voice, no face, just that single message. They were alive. They were watching. And now they had answered. James felt a strange mix of fear and hope. The game had changed again. He placed his hand on the glass, staring out toward Earth. He didn't know when humanity would return or what they would do next. But he knew one thing for sure. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. He turned to Lyra one last time. "Let's go." Together, they walked away from the window, leaving the Council's lies behind and stepping into a future no one could predict.